The average person experiences about 4 events in their lives that could trigger PTSD. The average career cop encounters between 100 and 400 incidents that could trigger PTSD. Retired Abbotsford Police Chief Bob Rich knows this all too well. In early 2015, Chief Rich lost 2 active members of his police department by their own hand. Their deaths shook him to the core. He was forced to look inward at his leadership, at the culture within his police department and in the first responder community. What was happening that PTSD and stigma rates were so high? Chief Rich took on the responsibility of identifying the source and changing the culture. His first priority became the wellness of his team. Rich says, "These are women and men who put their lives on the line every day to keep their community safe. In return, it is my job to keep them safe." He identified that a suck-it-up culture was one of the root causes, and it was counterproductive, putting everyone at risk. He and his team went to work to implement those needed changes. Then came the killing of Constable John Davidson, which rocked the policing community in Abbotsford, the Lower Mainland, and the province. However, thanks to the support of the Vancouver Police and other police officers who took over law enforcement duties in the city for more than 1 week, the Abbotsford PD was able to take a knee, psychologically, physically, and emotionally. Bob Rich says, as a result, we didn't lose another member, which can happen. In Ontario, over the past year, 9 officers took their own lives. Bob Rich is determined to help other police departments do what Abbotsford has done or begun to do by creating a culture that understands the trauma of horrific incidents and supports one another. We invited Bob Rich to join us for a conversation that matters about caring for the well-being of first responders who care about us.
Conversations That Matter is a partner program of the Centre for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the following and viewers like you. Please become a patron at conversationsthatmatter.tv.
You were chief of police for the city of Abbotsford.
That's right.
For a number of years and through some pretty trying times. And that's kind of helped, well, not kind of helped. It has put you directly into the position that you're in right now. And that is helping emergency personnel, police officers first, because that has been your discipline, but emergency personnel deal with the trauma that they experience. What was the statistic that you shared? Because I first met you at the Vancouver Police Ceremonial Unit's annual mess dinner, which I always find a fun and inspiring evening. But I was incredibly moved when I heard you speak, and you talked about how many PTSD potential incidents the average person experiences versus somebody who has, let's say, a 30-year career in policing.
Yeah, our best guess is that the average person is going to encounter 4 or 5 events in their life.
In their entire life.
Right.
Yeah.
That come upon a horrible car accident or a family event where somebody has a heart attack that could cause them PTSD, could cause them a traumatic injury. A police officer, we're guessing, on average, 100 to 400 events in their career over 30 years that may well cause trauma and may well lead to PTSD if it's not looked after.
I can't help but also think just the job of going to work as a police officer is also stress-inducing. I talk to people about what it takes to be a police officer, and it's not easy because I think at any given moment, on any day that you're at work, what could seem like it's a routine incident or encounter could turn deadly. And so you got to be prepared for that at every single moment.
You would go to work and you would strap on that gun belt and
Yep.
you would think, I wonder what's going to happen today. I wonder if that gun's coming out of the holster today. And that crossed your mind for sure.
So what led you to this point where you now start to say, okay, I recognize that this is an issue. And of course, it hit you full force with the Abbotsford Police Department when you lost Constable Davidson, and it was the continuation of a series of events. Maybe you can explain what had happened leading up to that.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
that people can get a sense of what it was like.
The events that was my crucible, my transformation around really paying attention to this, occurred in 2015. And I would say as a leader up to that point, my focus was what I call the mission of making a community safe. And if I wasn't focused on that, I was off base, is how I would think. In 2015, though, things happened to people in our organization that were awful. And probably the worst events happened, one in May and one in June, where two police officers who I loved and respected took their own lives. And trying to lead my organization through those two events broke me in lots of ways. And I would have told you I was limping leader at that point. I was hurt and I felt like I was failing. The organization felt like we were kind of crashing at that point. And that led me to start studying what was going on for policing and to look past the borders of the Abbotsford Police and see what was going on for police officers in Canada. And the studies, and there aren't that many yet, but Public Services Canada has done some work, the University of Regina has done some work, and Dr. Lisa Kitt here in this province has done some work. And they all consistently say that probably about 3 out of 10 police officers towards the end of their career are dealing with PTSD. And if you add in depression, anxiety disorders, and burnout, the number is much, much closer to 5 out of 10. And so half the people are leaving the job with a mental health condition created by the work that they did.
And so as a leader, you weren't aware of this?
No.
You didn't realize that it was such a severe
Right.
issue?
Of course, we had members go off with PTSD and you try to help them. And it seemed like it was just no different than somebody having a bad back or, and you just dealt with it when it happened, as opposed to thinking in terms of half of our people being hurt by this job is simply not morally, ethically acceptable. That was the transformation. I went from being, well, let's look after this person to we are doing something wrong. And so in 2015, I began to really change my focus and understand that we had to lead and run a police department in a completely different way.
I got to get you to hang on for a second while we take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Conversations That Matter is brought to you by Odlum Brown, client-focused investment firm that starts client relationships with straightforward conversations focused on you, your aspirations, and your investment priorities. Odlum Brown has been a supporter of Conversations That Matter from the day we started this show. Their only condition was that we provide a non-biased conversation with people from all sides of all sorts of issues. And of course, we couldn't produce this show without the support of Oh Boy Productions. If you're looking to produce a show like this one, I suggest you reach out to Oh Boy. They can help you produce it, and they can help you build your audience. And we also need your support. I ask you to please pledge $1 per show by going to conversationsthatmatter.tv/donate, because those dollars add up and play an important role in helping us produce this show. Now, back to the show. What did you discover were the elements, I guess, as you started to...
Tried to break it down, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So you start that process, but then not too long afterwards, you then also have the very traumatic loss of one of your members at the hands of a person who was intent on killing police officers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'd gone a long way in those 2 years.
Yeah.
2015 to the end of 2017. This happened in November of 2017 that we had Constable John Davidson murdered.
Yes.
And we had worked as a team to try to change the story within our own organization. One of the problems you have to deal with is stigma. So the fact that you believe you're weak if you go for help, or you're worried that other people will think you're weak if you go for help. And so we had to begin to reduce that and normalize the idea that what police officers do every day isn't normal.
No.
And so the fact they get hurt by it is normal in the sense that that's just a normal reaction to an awful event. And to help them understand that me going for help is just the right thing to do and it's not weird.
So how do you change that culture? Because as you're saying that, I go, yeah, on the surface, okay. But you're talking about a culture that has been honed over more than 100 years, at least in Canada, if not longer.
Absolutely. It was fun because I use analogies a lot. I talked about in the 80s when I came on that police officers were not physically fit. And we've gone through a huge transformation around being physically well. And the average cop works out every day, and they get that they've got to maintain that part of themselves. And I said, so why aren't we doing that for your brain? Why aren't we working that part of you out so that you stay well there as well? And so I use those two things as a way for them to understand that they now have to take steps, build resilience, go for help when they get hurt. It's no different than twisting your ankle, and normalizing it is how you reduce stigma.
So how do you normalize it, though? Because it's not a one-off, I'm going to send out a memo, and from here on
Absolutely.
in, it's okay to say, yeah, I'm suffering a little bit.
So for me, one of the things I believe is that a leader has to learn to be open with their people and talk about the pain that they're going through. And so my people watched me cry in front of them. When those members took their lives, I cried in front of my members. In 2016...
Whoa, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
To show that level of emotional vulnerability must have been, cathartic maybe in some ways, but also...
I'm trying to learn how to walk that line between have them having confidence that their leader's not falling apart, and for them to understand their leader hurts too, and it's okay for them to hurt and to deal with that. And so that's part of it, is to lead by example. If I don't go to see a psychologist, how do I expect my people to?
Right.
So, and constant communication, talking about it a lot with people, asking them how they're doing. I, in 2015, when I realized what was going on, went and met with all of the people who were off with PTSD and learned a tremendous amount about what they were going through. I learned more about PTSD from sitting across the table like this with somebody saying, I want you to know that I should have been here sooner when you went off with this. I should have bought you lunch the day after if I could have, but here I am. I want you to know that you're being supported, that we're going to do whatever we can to help you. And would you mind telling me your story?
What did you hear? What did you hear from those people that you spent that time with?
Yeah, every story was different. And PTSD doesn't manifest itself the same way in every person. I learned how many times we'd failed them along the way, that we could have done different things that would have helped them by being more supportive. So those are things for me to change in the future. I can't go back, but I did learn about how we can support people way more in the future going forward.
What would be one of those ways?
When a member goes through a difficult incident, and they walk back into the building, if they need to suck it up in order not to be teased or dealt with poorly, they're way more likely to get PTSD. If they walk back in the building and the sergeant goes, "That was a tough call. How did it land with you?" And is really open to hearing how that person did with that. The difference of being felt like you're being supported, and when your members come up and slap you on the back, going, "That was rough. Where are you at? Do you need some time away right now? Do you want to?" And those two different workplaces make all the difference in the world. You know how we're spending all this time saying, "Well, we need to be," and it's right. We shouldn't have bullying. We shouldn't have sexual harassment. Those are just getting rid of the negatives. What we really should focus on is way more than that. We have to create a positive, supportive work environment where people get held when they come back into the building. Like, it's going to be, I don't know what the language, the rules here, but it's a shit show out on the street for these members. But when the door slams on their butt when they walk in the building, that needs to be a place where they don't have to keep their armor up. They're supported, and it makes all the difference in the world when that happens.
You know, you talked about how when the Vancouver Police came to your aid after the death of Constable Davidson, you said it gave you and your team a chance to take a knee. Is that what you're talking about, taking a knee?
Right. So the military don't get to do this, but for policing, after you go to a difficult incident, after your life is at risk, after you've watched terrible human suffering, whatever it has been for you, we have the ability to pull you back. Like, you don't need to go to the next call. And we can begin to support you. And you're going through, at that point, a limbic reaction. Your limbic brain, your fight or flight brain, it needs 24 hours to clear what's just gone on. You need to deal with that. If you end up needing more support, you should go and get that. Like all of those things need to happen for you to get through that without being hurt.
Right.
And so, like a football player, if you take a shot in the ribs, you should go down on one knee and let the trainer come and take you off the field and figure out if you can do the next play, or if you need to have an x-ray of your ribs. It's really basic in that context. This is actually no different, just harder to see.
Yes.
So the incredible thing that happened to us on the day that we lost John, that John was murdered, before I could even turn around, I'm still actually at the scene watching my police officers trying to save John's life. And I look up and there's a Langley RCMP member beginning to help us.
Already.
While that's happening. And my phone rings and it's Chief Adam Palmer from Vancouver. And he says, "Bob, what do you need?" And I know I was inarticulate at that point. I was flooded.
Yeah.
But I said, I need help, Adam. And they put out an emergency call. 100 police officers started driving Code 3 from Vancouver. And so 300 police officers came that day into Abbotsford.
Yeah.
And all my police officers got to stop. As many as we possibly could let stopped.
Yeah.
So that entire shift didn't have to try to, the problem is, of course, policing doesn't stop. There was a domestic assault that I'm sure occurred in the next 2 hours.
That may not have been attended to.
Who's going to go to that call?
Right.
And we send that police officer who's just lost their close friend. How is that going to work? So the fact that our colleagues came and supported us and let us stop is night and day difference for those police officers. And that shift of police officers didn't go back to work for 8 days.
Yeah.
And when the funeral came, the other police departments, Vancouver and RCMP, covered us for 36 hours so that the night before, the day of, and the night after, our officers could sleep, honor John, and not have to go to work that night. And then we began policing again the next day and took back our city. And that ability that came from our comrades, our colleagues, is exactly what every person needs to do when things go bad for them. They need to stop and let other people take the slack for a while.
Right. So there is the psychological and emotional impact of losing John.
Absolutely.
But then there was still also the business of apprehending the man that is accused and on trial for shooting him. Those officers that were involved in a highly traumatic moment as well.
Right. We lost John in the first minute. The question was, how do we not lose anybody else? And the 5 officers that had to respond and use deadly force didn't turn out to be deadly, but they certainly had to fire their guns to stop Mr. Arfman from what he was doing. So now we need to support them, right?
Yeah.
And all the other officers who are now entering into an amazing amount of grief and trauma, having watched all of this. And so all of those people needed help immediately.
Well, when you described what happened in the takedown, I'm thinking, okay, not only are they responding to the emotional trauma of knowing that their colleague
John's down. They know that.
Yeah.
Yep.
But there's also the very real danger that they're presented with.
Absolutely.
It must have had very significant impact on them. And so based on what you knew, then how were you able to help them?
So we were not in the same place we were in 2015. We'd had 2 years to start working on these things. And nevertheless, we'd never faced what we faced in 2017, at the end of 2017. And so but our mission was no number 2.
Yeah.
We've lost John. No number 2. How do we do that? How do we begin to support these people? We actually reached out to the Edmonton Police Service, which has a great program for returning people to work after they go through trauma like this. It's complicated, but if you think about the psychology of it, after you've used a firearm in that way, you actually have to use behavioral modification to get back to being comfortable with that gun again, because it's a pariah for you, probably. Well, a lot of people after they've had to use
it in a manner that was deadly in nature, whether or not it...
That's right, and it completely triggers all of the feelings. That firearm is connected to it, depending on who you are and how that works. And so getting a person comfortable again with their firearm is you use psychological principles and work with their therapist. And so there's a whole lot we've learned about how you help somebody deal with the fact that they have received an operational stress injury and how they can recover from that without it developing into long-term post-traumatic stress disorder.
Now you're committed to helping other police forces and individuals find this same process and bring it into their departments.
Police are trying to figure this out. Fire's trying to figure this out, and lots of
Ambulance,
different things.
paramedics,
Absolutely, yeah. And there's so many fields out there that need to work on this. The nurses in emergency, the doctors. I could go on and on about who actually needs this. So I've kind of divided it into 5 chunks, and I'm trying to look after the first couple. I believe in prevention around this as much as you possibly can.
Right.
But I want to say up front, somebody gets PTSD. The right treatment, often they get better.
Yes.
And so people
you
who are
get PTSD, you're not stricken with it for life.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Okay.
Many people completely recover, and even if they can't get rid of all of it, it's dramatically reduced for them. And so people with PTSD should seek help. So that environment that I talked to you about.
Yes.
A leader's responsible to create that environment. And so a leader has to be this connective person that I wasn't and learned how to be by going in. That lunch with that person with PTSD should have happened way, way sooner. Mm-hmm. So that's a failure on my part, but a learning on my part about how to be a leader and support people. And if you saw that I went and had lunch with that other officer, you would know that you're going to be supported too.
Yes.
That the leaders actually care.
Yeah.
And so the symbol and the example of caring for people who have been hurt, super important to that work environment.
Yes.
Secondly, I as a leader am responsible for the culture at work. And the suck it up culture has to be transformed into a take a knee culture. Mm-hmm. Where when somebody gets hurt, we expect them to step back.
Yeah.
Right? If you got pneumonia, I'd expect you to step back. Well, if you went to an awful call last week, I expect you to step back if it's affected you in a way that you just aren't bouncing back. Mm-hmm. And how you and I respond to a call will be completely different. Mm-hmm. It's not the call, it's how you and I respond that we have to deal with.
Yes.
That's the trauma. That's how you responded. The third thing, which steps outside this a little bit, is we actually have to develop programs that support people. But those programs only work if they're in the hands of leaders who care and support. Mm-hmm. And then fourthly, we need to teach people resilience. So individually and as a group, we have to learn how to work through these things. And like being physically fit, you have to learn how to maintain your mental resilience and build it as you go.
Right. And that, in many ways, is one of the byproducts of having created the culture that allows for all of that to happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. But there's mindfulness training now, and learning the role of physical fitness and family support, and connecting to your family, telling your most important other person what's going on, and sharing. All of those things are part of how you do this, rather than just being trying to be an island. The last thing I throw in is you actually need a plan. An organization should create a plan and always be moving forward, always taking the next step.
Okay, I'm not being glib when I say this, but I would imagine that when you create that environment, you also create an environment that provides better policing for the community that is being served by those police officers.
The fact is, these officers are in a marathon of a career. It's 30 years. And if they can stay well and healthy, when they go to that next call and they're well, their ability to create an emotional connection with a victim of a crime, their ability to care is, of course, going to be enhanced because they're a well person.
Thank you for coming in and sharing this.